Well, first of all, I would like to thank INCYBER organizers team for such a great event. A lot of interesting sessions and a lot of insights. It's a great pleasure for me to be here. My first time in Lille. Not the first time in France, but the first time in this wonderful city. And my apologies, but my presentation will be in English because I don't speak French, as many of the other speakers. So I would like to briefly introduce myself, and then we will go straight to the point because the topic is quite hot. Just to tell you in brief, in one sentence, what Regular is doing as a company, the business. We know everything about identity documents, right? And many of you, even if you don't know that, at least a few times in your life, we're using our products or face our hardware and software products. Because we are those guys that are providing passport readers for the border control and hardware and software. So every time you're traveling outside European Union, let's say to United States or to Latin America or to Asia Pacific or to African countries, border control officers checking your passport. So we are providing both hardware and software solutions for that for 35 years. My personal experience is more focused on the software. And I have a big experience with deepfakes and most current, most sophisticated fraud in banking and fintech. And everything I will tell you today will be based on real experience, including my personal experience. But this is the third day of the conference, so probably you're a little bit tired. So let's play a small game, okay? So, I'm sorry. Sorry. I'm sorry for that. Just can I go back? No? It looks like I can only go forward. Okay. Oh, like this one. I already showed the answer, sorry. It's just because of this sticker. So yeah, how do you think all these images that looks real, right? Pretty much real. Especially this one, the first one. But in reality, all of them are fakes, right? The first one is a deepfake. The second one is a manipulated 2 lines of machine-readable zone. And the third one is a face morphing, which is also AI-based. So the danger of AI and the threat of AI is not underestimated. This is what is happening right now. And if we go on the real use case, with the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, it was 1 billion of Australian dollars. In euro, that probably not that much amount, but anyway. Reputation losses and loss of loyalty of the customers will be millions of euro. And if we look how it happened, they use a traditional workflow, traditional protection, where they verify the document, identity document, and they are making a decision based on the artifact itself, on the identity document itself. Our most recent study that we conducted with Censuswide 1 year ago, showing that there is a big shift from traditional fraud. What I call traditional fraud, just for you to understand better, it's fake IDs or presentation attacks for face comparison or face match, or social engineering, all kinds of social engineering, etc. Switch to impersonation attacks, like identity spoofing, like deepfakes fraud, mostly using AI. And the real problem of AI is not that it's giving advanced tools or capabilities to fraudsters. That was quite expected with each new generation of AI. The real problem is that the cost of fraud, so-called cost of fraud, dramatically reducing. And the creation of a deepfake or, let's say, injection attack 5 years ago cost thousands of euro. Now it is dozens of euro. So that's a big difference. And that is opening a big door to fraudsters. especially those fraudsters that don't have special knowledge or education. And that is the real danger. And that's why we need to check not only the artifact, like document, let's say, itself, or selfie, or line of session, but the signal, right? The origin, or how this data was collected. And just to give a definition of identity signal, it is any kind of data that is used to make sure whether a person behind the digital interaction real or fake, and also legitimate. Legitimate means eligible, for example, for onboarding in banking, let's say, or telecom, etc. Because it's not enough to be real, you also need to be qualified for certain use cases. And when we talk about identity signal integrity, of course, we have three main pillars: origin, where it came from; process, how it was generated; and of course, consistency. Does it match other signals? And this is what we call signal integrity. And only if you have three of them, you are really protected in a nowadays world. Now let's talk and let's look a little bit at the provenance gap in identity verification process itself. We have a lot of experience in that. We have thousands of customers globally using our products and other vendors for digital onboarding, know your customer process, identity and access management. And this is how traditional workflow looks like. So we have end user, we have camera, it can be mobile device or it can be web, and we have an engine, a solution or SDK for making decision for verification. And this is how it looks now within the current potential threats. So first of all, if you look at the interaction between user and camera, bad actor or bad guy, let's say, I can use a presentation attack. Now, what does it mean? I can wear an ultra-realistic silicon mask of another person, and trust me, 90% of the cases I will pass. I will pass the liveness check, because my eyes will be moving, my mouse will be moving, and this is not something AI-based or digital-based. It's just a physical mask that you can use. And we saw such use cases. Then, of course, this pass between camera and verification engine, starting from replay attacks and, of course, proxy to change your geolocation, of course, rooted devices, and, of course, you can use AI potentially to generate the whole session and inject it into the camera. This is how we see the stack and roles of identity signal, and of course we will analyze all of them in more details. So first of all, we'll talk about documents, then we'll talk a little bit about biometrics, about device behavior, and of course, how decision is being made, the most important part. So let's start from the document, right? So if you look at the document, like any physical document, like this one, which is a US passport, right? So here we can see like multiple security elements. For example, hologram, optically variable links, polycarbonate page, the chip inside the cover, and of course all of that can be verified at different extent based on your risk appetite, based on the use case. And of course, if we talk about the chip, RFID chip, this is the most advanced protection at the moment. But to be able to verify the chip, you need to have a mobile application, right? Because you need to have a capability from the mobile phone to get access to the RFID module of the iPhone or Android device. And it's a problem if you have only web. because in the web browser, both Google and Apple do not allow you to get access to the chip. So the second part is, of course, integrity, right? So there are multiple ways how we can make sure that the ID is valid and not manipulated, because you can take real ID and manipulate it, and verify different kind of security elements. In our industry, it is called document liveness, so-called document liveness. So there are multiple capabilities how you can use mobile device, mobile camera, to make sure that some of those security elements, let's say hologram, is visible and presenting in the right coordinates, in the right place. And this is definitely a good level of protection. And of course, different kind of instruments to make sure that it's not AI modified. Because AI modification or AI generation for documents, that's the topic #1 in fraud nowadays. Oh, sorry. Now, biometric integrity. So let's say you have a use case where you don't need a document. Because of regulatory requirement, you're not a bank. You just need to make sure that the person is not underage, let's say, or make sure that the face is matching the selfie. So this is what we call biometric integrity. Typically, it has two elements, so-called liveness or liveliness, depending on how you call it, assessment, and then face comparison. And also might be face search across the database if you have the face of the end user in your database. Then, of course, device integrity. So we need to make sure that the device is real, that the camera is not virtual, for example. There is a timestamp, that the session is binded to the device, that the device is not rooted, which is quite easy, unfortunately, to do on Android right now. Then, of course, behavior analysis to make sure that the behavior is human-like rather than manipulated or AI being used there. And of course, signal correlation. So how different signals correlate to each other. So it's not enough to estimate or to make judgment based on the one signal, because if one signal fails or if it's compromised, you need somehow to continue the verification process. Last but not least is life cycle evidence, so-called life cycle evidence. That means that it's not enough to go through the whole flow one time, let's say, to onboard your end user and say, okay, we're all good. We don't need to do anything else. You need to go through all those steps each and every time you're doing identity verification. And of course, all of that is risk-based. Sorry. Okay. So if you, oh, good. So if you do all of that, you definitely have a maximum level of confidence. But it's very important to say that it's all of what I'm telling you right now, it is valid by the moment, because we don't know what will be tomorrow and what generative AI will bring tomorrow in terms of new capabilities and new fraud. We can only try to predict that. Now let's talk a little bit about the capture-rooted identity verification process and why it's so important. From my experience, I can tell you that most of the solutions on the market, most of the vendors, and if you ask any bank or fintech or telecom, let's say how they're doing know your customer verification process, they will tell you that they're trying to catch fraud on the artifact level, on the level of the document, whether it's manipulated, fake or real, on the level of selfie and face comparison, for example, if the person pretend to be another person, etc. But all of that is what we call traditional fraud. Reality shows that when the bank, let's say, is asking you for high-risk transaction to provide your document, like photo of your passport, it is not enough. It is quite easy. It was quite easy to manipulate. It's really an open door to fraudsters, because the real question they should ask, and they should check how this image was captured. And here we are talking about capture-rooted identity, and we will go step by step with the capture event. So first of all, we need to have hardware-backed trust to make sure that the device is real, that it's not rooted, and bad actor didn't have access and ability for injection attack. Then, of course, signal correlation. We already talked about that. Decision orchestration. It is also quite an important process, because when you get data from multiple identity signals, you can score them separately, and based on your risk appetite, you can orchestrate the final decision. Or, for example, you can send this session to the manual review if you have any concerns or any doubts. And of course, life cycle confidence. That means in a highly regulated environments, let's say banking, it is obligatory, because you, as a bank, you need to have audit logs and store each and every verification session. And in case of any troubles, you should be able to demonstrate how the whole process was organized, what kind of checks you applied on each and every step, to prove that you did your best, and there wasn't like any kind of a missing parts according to what they're asking for. And finally, a small practical evaluation framework. Security and audit checklist. So first of all, decision traceability. I already briefly described the use case with the audit trial and why it's so important. Of course, capture channel trust, because you need to, especially for the high-risk transactions or high-risk operations, high-risk use cases, you need to make sure that the capture is not compromised. And if we talk about, for example, mobile versus web, of course, it is much more reliable to use mobile device versus web, because on the web you give fraudsters much more capabilities for potential fraud. So-called zero trust signals or zero trust environment is quite popular, and I heard a lot of speakers in sessions here talking about so-called zero trust approach. It is also, of course, applicable here. How does it work? So let's imagine you have mobile application and you're collecting data from the passport, right? Let's say from the chip, biometric chip on this passport, and you do not process it on the mobile device because you don't trust the mobile device, because it can be compromised for multiple reasons. That's why you just encrypt the raw session with all the data, including biometric data, and send it to the backend and securely process it on the backend. So this is most common understanding of so-called zero trust approach. Of course, session binding. I already explained why it's important, and the same for lifecycle confidence, right? But it's very important to say that if you do all of that protection measures, and check all those signals we discussed, you will have quite a sophisticated user journey, right? And the problem is that on the business level, there are always two parts. Let's say division or department that is responsible for business, and they want to get the best metrics for success rate of the end user during the onboarding or know your customer process. And on the other side, there is a compliance and risk managers. And they don't want to pass any fraud. And if we apply all those measures, the user journey would be so sophisticated and so hard, so I would say only 20% of the end user would be able to successfully get to the last step and be onboarded. That's why all that I mentioned, it should be applicable based on your risk appetite, based on the use case, and not necessarily to go all together. And from our experience, for example, if you have a capability, if you have a mobile device, a mobile application for the end user, and you, for example, can verify the data on the chip, you can ignore all the other checks because this data, this biometric data on the chip, is enough from a security perspective to make sure that the document is not fake. Of course, with the condition that you also do active and passive authentication to make sure that the chip has been signed by the issuing authority and it's not cloned. So what I'm trying to say here is that when you do your own checklist or if you check the solution that you've been already using, it is always a matter of configuration. And it's always a compromise for searching the golden middle between the amount of checks you can apply to try to catch fraud at every level and the business metrics. Because if you have like super good protection, you applied everything, but you have unhappy users, most likely your business will be not competitive. So if we look at the past, we were talking about artifact verification or authentication. Now we're talking about signal verification. And the future, in our understanding and based on our experience, it is based on signal provenance verification. So that's all on my end. I was trying to be short, to leave some space for questions. I will be more than happy to answer any question you might have, or you can contact me directly. We'll be happy to talk. Thank you so much for your attention.